So, can you start by sharing your full name and where and when you were born?
My name is Wali Muhammad Walton. I was born March 27, 1966 in Detroit.
Thank you. And can you tell me a little bit about your family and their story of how they came to Detroit?
My family story starts around 1840. I had a great, great, great grandma named Martha who was brought here as a slave, and she was raped by our slave master, who was also my great, great, great grandfather. And he sold her. She had produced a woman by him named Peggy Clay, who also was a slave. She was produced a son after she got married in 1865, in the year of the freedom, as she says. She produced a son named William Poole. After her marriage and the production of that son, he looked like a white man's son. So they forced sterilized my great great grandma Peggy so that she wouldn't have any more children, even though she was a freed woman at the time and married. That man, William Poole, he became a traveling preacher and had land that was given to him that he tended to grow cotton. And he could sell his cotton at market, something blacks could not do at the time. And he had a large sale. And from 1923 to 1928, he had visited North until he stayed here in 1928. And he sent back 6 tickets to my grandfather and some other family members to come north. And when they came north to stay in Black Bottom. And the locations are not remembered by heart with me.
That's
but
okay.
It's written. And that's how we got here.
Okay. What was your family's relationship to Black Bottom?
It's kind of long.
Mm-hmm.
They founded a movement that led to become the Nation of Islam in America. And it spurred off into a whole lot of other things within the movement that some people heard of and some may not have heard of. And there was a series of raids, there was jail times, deaths, assassinations, and we had it pretty tough. My mother, it's pretty long. But
You can share some of what we've been talking about. So like you mentioned the raid, if you want to talk more specifically about that, or talk more a little bit about how the process of how it started.
Well, they met. A lot of meetings took place underground in houses at the time that was located in Black Bottom. They feared the police. They were dealing with Wali Muhammad. At this time, Elijah Muhammad he was not even Elijah Muhammad. He was Elijah Poole. He was a laborer in the movement. To become leader of the nation was a post that was not wanted by anyone in the movement at that time. Something a lot of people may not know, but it was nothing he wanted. There was a lot of, they had to go through the community, teaching it underground. They had meetings that took place. And they worked, they had jobs, Before coming here, Elijah Muhammad, my grandfather's brother, he picked cotton and worked at the copper mill. That's what he was doing, and he was married. My great grandpa William sent for him and his wife. That was 2 of the 6 tickets that he sent back with my Uncle Charlie, who had came with him. Uncle Charlie stayed south, and he died down south. He didn't want to come here. Like I said, they had land and stuff they tended to. They didn't have it all as bad later years in the South as they had in the earlier years of the South. Like I said, this story goes back to 1840. There were times that they were experiencing slave issues. Some of them I could get into, some I'd have to read and tell you. But it's a long story. A lot of it is written. Is there anything else I can share?
Yeah, you have all the details. So I'm like, whatever you would like to share. Like when you say it's a long story, like this is our time.
I know them all by heart. I could tell you one from 1904. This is after slavery. My grandfather wasn't born. Elijah Muhammad was 7 years old. My great grandpa William and my great great grandma Peggy, they had a shack. The shack burnt down to the ground. They had nowhere to go. They basically live in the fields. This is before the land was given to him by the judge or any of that. It's one of the hardest times of his life. And there was a man that was picking cotton. That was in the cotton fields with them. That they were sharecroppers. He gave my great grandpa William his life savings that he was saving to go up north, to take his family up north, to help them reestablish a shed, reestablish some place to live in the cotton on the cotton fields. And that man gave everything he had to my great grandpa, and that summed up to be $5 in 1904. That was $5. That was his life savings as a sharecropper, and he gave it to my grandfather, my great grandfather, and saved us. And you know, my great grandpa William had 17 kids after they, like I say, they sterilized my great grandmother. They forced her to do it. They nearly wiped our family out with that action. But look what happened. You end up breeding somebody that started a movement that's good today, which is 2024 February. So that's nearly 120 years later.
It's a legacy.
And it goes back further. It goes back 80 years before that. So it's a lot. It's a lot that got us north. It's a lot we take for granted now. We just don't even give it any thought. A lot of us. That's why projects like this should mean something, because there are people that came here and they went through hell. I mean hell. You know, one man that my great grandpa, well, my great grandmother, and my great grandpa William, they had one man that had problems. There's a story written, I don't know it all full detail, but they burned his feet off. You know, the white people got together and burned his feet off. After they got him back south, he had fled. They tricked him back. He went back thinking it was over with whatever was going on with his family, the story that's in my possession. And they burned his feet off, killed him, in a pretty horrible way. So there are other stories. They went through hell and back to get here. You know, it's something I've never seen. I can't imagine a time like that. And I don't think any of us can.
Do you know why your great great grandparents decided to come to Detroit? Like, why Detroit?
My grandmother's story is a little brutal with that. I understand that. My grandfather, I think he doesn't, well, I think with my grandfather, he doesn't name a particular reason why my great grandpa on his side come, but that he says things that happened. You know, my great grandpa William had to travel to town to get supplies, and one time my grandfather was with him as a little boy, and he had to go to town to get supplies, and they wanted to make my great grandfather dance. And I'm not talking about the type of dances we do. When they say dance back in the early 1900s and stuff like that, they shot at your feet to make you jump around like they did in cowboy movies. The white folks call it make a nigga dance. And they was gonna do that to my great grandfather. But my grandfather, as a little boy, was with him, and they saw him. And to show you how God works, they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it in front of with his son with him, with the boy with him. They didn't do it, but they wanted to, and they was very adamant about it, according to my grandfather. And that was one story, because I'd asked him. Those are oral stories. One he gave me. He said it just, my great grandpa. He did a lot of traveling. He was a traveling preacher. He had 4 churches under his belt, so he was running into issues. And he was a successful black man who appeared to be white. He had freckles, red hair. His mother, my great grandma Peggy, as I say, is the daughter of a rape from Master Clay, who raped my great grandma Martha, which makes the master my great grandfather. So he knocked off 2 birds with 1 stone, if you want to say that.
What you've mentioned to me about, how the start of the nation was happening in Black Bottom. Can you tell more about that? You mentioned the raid, and you brought in some stuff that gives some perspective from the folks that were impacted. Are there any details you'd like to share about
the raids that they did at that time at Black Bottom and 34, that was 3408 Hastings Street. That was the Castle Theater at the time. A lot of people don't know this, but there were other things going on inside of the Castle Theater. One of them was a large numbers operation that was going on by 2 black men who controlled the numbers, organized crime, if you want to call it that, from that era. There wasn't no connections between them and what was happening with Wali Muhammad and my grandfather and great grandparents. They just had another office located, or another activity going on inside the theater. The theater had offices and stuff located above it. But with my grandparents, the raids that happened with them that took place was they accused them because they were teaching Islam early, and they were doing something that they didn't want the black community to have, quite frankly. They didn't want them to have that understanding of self. They were giving people names, identity, getting away from slave names. They were teaching people to read. They were teaching people about who they were, where they came from. Mind you, these are old slaves. These are people that didn't even know, in some cases, what year it was. So you're talking about literacy at its lowest level. So they had to teach these people. And my grandmother was a secretary at a very young age, like 15. She was a secretary for Wali Muhammad, something that if that movement was recognized by any other standard, they'd be making movies about her. but because it's an unpopular movement, they choose not to. But her family come here because of what was going on in Mississippi with they had a doctor in the town that they came from, and this is my grandmother tells me this, explained this story to me, that they were this doctor, they were whipping people. They would have them whipped, with a bull whip, what have you, whip them, because they had a way of healing themselves when they did not keloid. And this doctor wanted to know what they were doing. So he would have one whipped and then they'd see what happened. But I don't know, by the time that, to escape that, my great-grandparents on my grandmother's side, they brought her and they came north to escape that. So I don't know much about that story. I know more about my grandfather's story than my grandmother's. But that's what they came to escape, my grandmother's side, which is pretty horrible. So people went through hell and back to get to Black Bottom. They met in Black Bottom. My grandmother and grandfather met in Black Bottom. They went to the movements together. Like I say, she was a secretary. He became a minister. They got married in that movement at 17, fell in love in Black Bottom. And they had 14 kids at that time, from that time on. So they went through a lot. That's one thing, not to mention the forced sterilization of my great-grandmother. A lot of women don't realize what that really means. But that tantamounts to somebody coming to your home and forcing you to have a hysterectomy. Mm-hmm. Something they probably do and you don't even know it. Nowadays, they probably trick you into it. There's a lot of women with it. Mm-hmm. I often wonder, is it the result of another way of what happened to my great-grandmother? That's something that the sisterhood should take a look at, because, I hate the idea they did that to my great-great-grandmother, excuse me. Forced sterilization was not something pleasurable. People don't realize that if it was a such thing of anesthesia at that time, which it more than likely wasn't. I think that came about in the 1890s or late 1880s when they came. Even if they had it, they wouldn't give it to her. Mm-hmm. She's a descendant of a slave. They took her to a barn and turned her upside down and went to work on her privates. That's nothing like today's hysterectomy, excuse me. Ain't nothing what we go through today. Though it could be just as, mentally shocking.
Right.
It's a rotten thing to do to somebody.
So you mentioned the Castle Theater. Are there other sites or locations in Black Bottom that were important to your family?
Yeah, there's addresses that my grandfather had documented. There are other locations. There's places in Eastern Market where Wali Muhammad, they spoke outside. They would come outside and just start ministering to the community, so people could hear them. There were attempts that one time they were threatening to shoot them and stuff like that. But they would minister right down in Eastern Market. I believe on the Shed 2 is his location there. I can show you. I've got it written and stuff, but it's a spot where they would come out and he would come out in the street, just start teaching, start talking. Something that we probably consider a guy at the gas station doing today to be out his mind. But here's a man that doesn't even look like a black man. Wali Muhammad come out and did that, and Elijah Muhammad had to teach too. But that was later on. That was later. Wali Muhammad did that in the beginning, before they got the theater. And before they started the theater, after even they met in homes. Those homes, those are Black Bottom homes that they would meet in the basements of. Some of them had been raided by the police too. They would raid them. They did not want Islam or the teaching of it, or us to have a flag or nationalism for ourselves to ever happen for us. No one wanted us to have a flag or be able to stand together as an independent nation of people. They still don't want that. They would rather see civil rights than see us independent. try it and watch what happens. But that's what they want. And that's what they were fighting for. They wanted independence. They didn't want to be under the government that we live under. They wanted independence for themselves. They even developed the flag. And there's stories about it. I got that too. But that's another thing that's come from what happened in Black Bottom, come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a movement that came out of it.
Did your great-grandfather share any stories with you about what they heard about the destruction of Black Bottom, and how that impacted your family?
My great-grandfather, they were there so long ago, they didn't mention, they talked a lot about I-75. My grandfather did, about how they swept through the community and just disbanded it, and they didn't like it. They had moved over to Linwood and stuff. They had moved to the other things, the mosque over to Linwood. They moved, but there were other locations in Black Bottom that's mentioned, and some of them, one of them, I just read this morning, when they had closed. I don't believe it closed due to, well, I want to call it reconstruction of the area for the Eastern Market and all of the freeway, but he didn't mention that. But they mentioned a lot about, he mentions how I-75 came in and just dispersed everything. But they were struggling so much with the movement, they were trying to hold people together, anywhere they could, wherever they could move to. That was a lot on them to do that. So that I want to say they were a lot focused on that, and they pulled many people with them into the movement as they could, because they ended up moving on Townsend. They lived on Townsend on the east side. So I don't know. I don't think Townsend was considered part of Black Bottom or not. I'm not sure, but they lived on Townsend for years before they ended up moving in the 1960s on Chicago, 2274 Chicago to be exact, and the Boston Edison district. Before they ended up moving there in a year before I was born. That was 1965. I was born in 66. So they did that. And just pretty much they spent a lot of time getting people to come with them. More so, because like I said, they wanted independence from it. So some of it, they didn't like it. They hated it. They mentioned that a lot as far as the location, what happened in the 30s and stuff. They mentioned that. But the destruction of it, they didn't mention in detail, but they didn't like it. And they spoke a lot, pretty bad about I-75. They didn't like that. But they didn't, in detail, they just didn't like it. Mm-hmm. They didn't say much about the details.
In your perspective, how do you think, your family, your community, Black Detroiters overall were impacted by the destruction of Black Bottom?
You've got Greektown, you've got other communities that's got their representation, and Black Bottom was ours. My family came north. All they went to come to Black Bottom after coming back and forth for 5 years. They could have went somewhere else, but they chose Detroit and came. So Black Bottom was a place that they saw that they could develop. They could develop and continue to grow. And it was their community, like any other community. You wanted to grow and you want to develop it. You don't want it to be swept away. And I think the effects is, years later, we're still trying to find a community. We're still trying to develop a community for ourselves, a model community for ourselves that we own, that we control, that we decide what happened in, not some other entity. That's what they wanted to do, and they had that. And it got it got swept up by freeway. I think today we don't have the businesses we should. I think if we had had Black Bottom, we'd had a central area where all the African American community can go to and enjoy their own businesses, their own way of life, a way that, you know, that's constructive for the African American community, rather than what we see now. I mean, the crack era, the crime. You see other communities infringing on our economics. Elijah Muhammad was deep in the community economically. He advocated opening businesses, putting people to work and stuff, when others didn't. He did it for years. That's something that's we miss now. Why should 80-90% of our businesses in our community be owned by the Arab community or someone? That doesn't make sense to me. Why is it someone else have to come and do what we can do for ourselves that we already do for others? That's illogical. And Black Bottom was a symbol of something that we would have had to hold on to that way of life. The old slaves that came here, they came here almost with the mind of an immigrant. How can I go north and make a better life? How can I take what I've learned here and live free? And they saw that in Black Bottom. They even saw it as a way to educate themselves. My grandparents, like I said, my grandmother was a secretary for Wali Muhammad. My grandfather records that they had white people that would come in the theater and help them to teach the community. That's something that's not known. They had the white community come and helping them. So it's not something that communities outside of them didn't aid in. So they were respected for what they were doing. If they were getting help, they were respected. So the economics is probably what did it. You know, no one wants to see African American live better than anyone else but the African American. No one wants to see that. And Black Bottom was that. It was a way to become that. Slaves worked hard. The best thing to ever put on your resume when you did. If I had to put anything on a resume for my job to get a job, well, hell, I was a slave for Ford Motor Company. I built such and such for Ford Motor Company. That's just an example. Now, if I was a slave for someone, that's a lot of work experience. You know, that's the best work experience. You didn't do nothing else. So if you had people that were slaves and they come to live in a community and develop it, and they knew nothing else, that's a threat to somebody who can go, well, I can go to the bar tonight. I can go relax tonight. He can do my work for me. That's a threat to them. So why not destroy it like they do everything else? They destroyed Oklahoma, the people there, the people, the African Americans there. They did it everywhere. That's not, there's a lot of places they did that. Not just Black Bottom. And not just in Oklahoma. They did it in a lot of places. You know, it was the fear of I'm doing better than you. You know, no master wants a slave to be better than himself. And that's, you know, they did that to my family. Not only did they try to wipe us out with the sterilization and stuff, they falsely accused us of human sacrifices and raids and stuff like that. They falsely accused my family of the death of Malcolm X, or El Malik Hashif Shabazz. That's what he became. It's just lie after lie. And the truth had to be known. My grandfather, Supreme Minister John Muhammad, entrusted me with his studies, his last work on his family that he kept away, even from his family. He trusted me as a son to tell his story. And I'm gonna do that, or if it kills me.
Can you say, what do you think reparations should look like for the destruction of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley? So this 375 development is occurring, and they're saying that potentially 20 to 30 acres of land will be available for development and use. What would you like to see there?
Skilled, educated African Americans in business, developing the land, expanding it throughout the community, and showing a model community. A model community we could be for the rest of the nation. I think those of us that work hard, those families that were removed, first and foremost, should have an option, a choice with the land, and not just the land. The banking system should be supporting us. It should be something within the banking community to back us. The African American community gets enough money in its pocket to be I believe the 5th or 9th richest country in the world if we was to go independent. How come there's no banking system to support that? Our community's been infringed on in so many ways. That's one right there. Another way we infringed on is retail. You can't go to nowhere and buy anything and look behind the counter and see that you're the one controlling it. That's infringement. There are other places in the world you can't do that. That would start a war. And it would. You go to another country and try some of that. That's war. But we get infringed on left and right and do nothing about it. Just accept it. Well, they won't do this. They won't. I'm tired of hearing the word they. I hate the word they and can't. Them two words, African Americans should never even use. Is me, us, and that's it. Our. We gifted people. They took something from us a long time ago. We allowed it to be, and we allowed it to stay in their hands. This movement here, Black Bottom Archives, is a way to put something back in our hands. And we deserve it. When somebody takes something from you, you're supposed to take it back. Period. No matter how they feel about it, what laws they make, they took something from us. We deserve it back. They're going to make laws to keep you from getting it back because the ones who took it is the same ones that make the laws. I would do it. You would too. You'd make a law to keep somebody from getting back what you took. It'd be legal then, though immoral. So yeah, we deserve back what's ours. I feel like that. And not just that, the political and economic structure that we should have by now is to be restored. I feel like that. I'm not gonna wait 50 years for another, like we do now, marching 50 years later after Dr. King still trying to establish the same things, after George Floyd got killed, we still trying to march around for the police to act with some sense. Yeah, we've been marching for that and are acting that. We want that since they took us from Africa. They send uniformed people in Africa to take us. What do you think the uniform here gonna do? It's the same thing. I'm sorry.
You don't have to apologize.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm just, the truth is real and it hurts. And if it's funky and no one can accept it, then the truth ain't for you. Keep living a lie. Might be better. But when the truth get rich and successful, don't come running to the truth. Stay with the liar. I feel like that. Now I know that's cold-blooded, but heck, it's truth.
What do you want future generations to remember about Black Bottom and Paradise Valley?
Never forget it. And never forget what they've been through before they made it to Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. Remember, Black Bottom and Paradise Valley was a goal for the people coming from the South. That was a goal to them. That was something they was trying to get to. So don't forget what they went through before they made it to Black Bottom. And then don't forget what they went through there, and don't forget what we must have to do today. You know, keep it growing. Don't let nobody else get their hands on it. No infringement in our communities. Our children is hopeless. It's going through hopelessness because of infringement. Infringement is the number one reason our kids are in jails, trying to get some money, or what have you. You know, number one reasons. The crack era was the number one reason. Those reasons that came about were due to infringement. If your child can get up and go to work for you, he didn't have to go commit a crime today. If your child can get up and go be educated by you, he knows what he has to do for you, not for Christopher Columbus. It's a different thing.
Why is it important for Black history to be preserved and passed on?
Because they've been trying to wipe out our history all the way back to the time of the Kushites. They've been trying to wipe our history out all the way back thousands of years. Nowadays, we live in a time where they want to convince you, rather than wipe it out, they want to convince you that it never happened. That way, you don't have to go through the struggle of destroying monuments, lying about this, lie about whatever. But to convince us that something never happened can make us become what they want us to be. And I'm not with being anything for nobody else. I'm not fake like that. If you're gonna be something for somebody that they want you to be, you fake. That's not a leader. That's not a believer either. That's fake. That's imitation. You know, we gotta know who we are. A lot of people don't realize this, but have you ever heard of Benito Mussolini?
Tell us about it.
Was you ever heard of World War II? I'm pretty poor people heard of World War II. Well, Mussolini was Hitler's one of his allies. Italy. You know, Italy, Mussolini felt that Africans should not have a history, and gassed and bombed Ebenezer, which is modern day Ethiopia. Ethiopia had never been colonized. That's the only country in Africa that did not experience colonization. All the rest did, the whole continent, but Ethiopia. Ethiopia had love from a Spanish king, I believe. I think it was a Spanish king or something. But they considered them to be an ally, so they didn't, when Spain and Portugal was going around doing all that crap, and they didn't bother Ethiopia. So Mussolini was angry about their history, and when it said blacks did not have a history, he went to destroy it. So he bombed them and gassed them, and that was the start of World War II. That's what started it. Selassie went to the United Nations. He was an African, Ethiopian, and told them what Mussolini was doing, and they overlooked him. They gave him they gave him asylum, and the European country overlooked him. But then war came to Europe. So he tried to warn them well before Churchill and any of them other ones they talk about. It was Selassie.
Is there anything else that you want to get on record before we wrap up?
Lunch.
You said lunch.
Something to eat.